All right, so now we're going to move on to multiplying. Okay, in algebra, multiplying, you use new symbols. Okay, so you're probably used to doing 5 times 3, where x is the times, right? Or any kind of multiplication, you use that x. We're no longer going to use that because in algebra, you're going to be using x to represent a variable like all the time. All right, so it's going to be really confusing. Like that's what I wrote over here. It was like, oh, 5 times x, right? Oh, is it 5 times x, or is it 5xx, or, what do we mean here? So to avoid all of that confusion, in algebra, we no longer use that x sign to mean multiplication. So please do not use that anymore. That really only applies to the people who are doing the writing, the handwritten packets. But it's still good to know too for future math. Right, so instead you can use this little dot, so that represents 5 times 3. You can use a parentheses in one of the numbers. Actually, you can even do it like this, right? So 5 parentheses 3, or parentheses 5 parentheses 3. Those mean the same thing. They mean 5 times 3. Or you can even put both of the numbers that you're multiplying together in parentheses. So these are all correct ways to represent multiplication in algebra. Just do not do this way anymore. Okay, just to avoid confusion. Okay, so otherwise multiplying, same thing. Your times table, whatever. Use a calculator for big numbers. There's specific rules though when it comes to multiplying with negative numbers. Okay, so the number part is always going to stay the same. 5 times 3 is 15. When you start putting in negatives, so negative 5 times negative 3, you get a negative 15. 5 times negative 3, also negative 15. Right, so you notice we get 15 every single time. Right, negative 5 times negative 3, this time it's positive 15. Okay, so the rules for multiplying, when you multiply two numbers, if they have the same sign, right? So that means if you're multiplying a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, your answer is going to be positive. So same sign, answer is positive. If you have different signs, positive times negative, negative times positive, your answer will be negative. Okay, so same signs, answer is positive, different signs, answer is negative. Okay, but I want this to be clear, that's when you're multiplying two numbers. Okay, so if you're multiplying 3 numbers, like right here, or more numbers, then what I like to do is just do it in pairs. So I do the first pair first. That's how I got this 4. Okay, so negative 2 times negative 2, they're the same sign, right? They're the same, therefore my answer is positive, so that's why I have a positive 4. And then I just carry down my negative 2, so I go 4 times negative 2, and I got my answer of negative 8, right? Because now it's a different sign. Positive 4 times negative 2, negative 8. I did it again over here with negative 1. I just did a bunch of negative 1, so we didn't have to do a lot of complex multiplication. But, right, so I do my first 2, and I get this 1. Okay, so then I carry down all of this, right? So I just did that, carry all the rest down. Then I do my next pair, right? I get negative 1, and I carry down these 2. Next pair, get positive 1, carry down my last one, and that leaves me with negative 1. Okay, and then there's a pattern here. If you notice, I have 5 negative numbers, an odd number. Right, over here I do, over here I do an even number. There's 4, right? So again, 1 times 1, I carry these down. Got that. Multiply these together, carry this down, and then I get this. Right, so this time it's positive. Right, positive 1 over here was negative 1. So there's a pattern here with the odd and evens. So if you are multiplying a bunch of negative numbers and you have an odd number, then know your answer is going to be negative. Okay, if you have an even number of negative numbers that are being multiplied, your answer is going to be positive. Okay, so and then you still have to like actually multiply the numbers together, you know, just basic multiplication. This is just to help you figure out the sign. If you don't remember this rule, that's fine. You can just do it, you know, these two ways, or well, these ways. Do any of it these ways. It's a little bit longer. This is just a shortcut, but sometimes I can't remember every single math rule, right? So it's fine if you don't remember it. As long as you remember this rule right here, that's the most important one, because this never changes. You're going to use it all the time. Lots of negative numbers. Okay, and then some, again, the same properties for addition, commutative property, right, where you can do it in any order that you want. So I'm not going to go too deep into it because it's the same, except now it's with multiplication. Right, and associative property, again, I can move my parentheses any way I want, or I can just remove them, and I'm still going to get the same answer. Right, and again, this is only for multiplication and addition. You cannot do this with division. You can't do this with subtraction, right? Like if you try and change the order in subtraction, 12 minus 3, right, is 9. What about 3 minus 12? That is negative 9, right? They are not the same. You can't change the order. It doesn't work for subtraction or division. These properties are only good for multiplication. Okay? And that's why we learn how to change subtraction to addition, like what we did before. Right? And later on, in a few weeks, we'll talk about how to change division into multiplication. I know it sounds complicated, but you can actually do it. But that way you can use these properties as much as you want for anything. Because you can learn how to change subtraction to addition and multiplication to, division to multiplication, right? Because really they're all related, and math is really cool that way, that you can manipulate it. Okay, some last properties. The identity property, really basic ones. Any number times 1 is equal to the number, right? So 5 times 1 is 5. 100 times 1 is 100, right? This is a basic one. You're actually going to be really surprised by how much I bring up this property throughout this whole quarter, right? So it's actually a really important one. Okay, so just remember it now, because we're going to use it a lot. Zero product rule. Any number times 0 is equal to 0, right? So 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 100, 0 times anything, it's just going to be 0. And we'll use that when we get to quadratics. Like that's the very last topic we're going to get to at the end of the quarter. Right, and multiplying by -1 gives you the numbers opposite. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with opposites. Right, 5 times -1 gives me -5. So you can see these two are opposites. Right, 100 times -1 gives me -100. This is that double negative I was talking about. So if I start with a negative, I multiply it by -1, I end up with a positive, right? Because of that multiplying same signs gives me a positive answer, right? So yeah, so these are just your basic multiplication properties. Again, this one I bring up a lot, mainly because this one stumps people until they remember this property, right? So it's a good one to just remember. Okay, we'll get to this one. We'll use this way later. And yeah, just basics of multiplication.